tell us what you learned at Amazon, KPMG, and tell us a story about Better RX real fast.
Okay.
So I'm gonna interrupt you because this is one, like you said, everybody faces this. Everybody has more needs than capabilities. So what did you learn about how to allocate so that you got the best peak yield? Welcome everyone. We're back to Fearless Founders, and I have an old friend, Ben Clark, here joining us. Ben started, joined, created a beautiful software company that he just exited. And Ben, we're really happy that you're here on the show. Thank you, man. Thanks for being available.
Super happy to be here. But I really appreciate the reconnection. It's always good to spend time with you.
Hey, there's so much to go, and we're not going to spend a lot of time. Tell our wonderful listeners and viewers just a 2-minute version of who you are, how you came to be.
Personally?
Yeah.
So the best part about me is really the family that I both come from, and my good wife and our 3 amazing kids. I grew up in Connecticut. Wonderful parents, just really fantastic nurturers, and taught us high discipline and showed a lot of love. So that set the stage for me trying to be a really good husband and father. I mess up a lot, but my wife helps me know when I'm messing up. So she makes me smarter and better. So Danielle is, we've been married for about almost 30 years now, 29 years. Thank you. And then we have just the best 3 kids, any dad could ask for. They're just, I tell people all the time, they came great, and we're just trying not to mess them up. So we have a 27-year-old and then 21-year-old twins. So girl, and then boy is the word.
Wow. That's an important point. The reason I asked you to do that, and don't always do it on our guests, is to share with our listeners how important it is to have such a strong, stable foundation on which to build a business. It's hard enough when you are duking it out, solving fires and creating all sorts of growth elements that challenge you, and not to have a strong, stable base. Man, it rocks your confidence, and you can see it. And in fact, very often you lash out and see things from a lens of half empty, and makes a big difference. It's an important point. I knew your background, and I just wanted to make that point. You agree, Ben?
100%. And in addition to that, all the great things that, all the wins that you have losses and wins along the way, but hopefully at the end of the day, you end up with, some big wins and everything works out the way that you want it to. When that happens, the wins are only really significant and meaningful only because you've got, a great gang with you as you've gone along the way and, gone through the battles and the support that you've received. And so at least that's been my experience. It's a much better journey. The journey is much more enjoyable and tolerable when you have that, when you put family first.
So with that said, let's do another quick 2 minutes. You went through and have worked with big companies, KPMG, as well as, if I remember, Amazon. And here you are now, having helped to grow a company, exited it. And if I understand this correctly, you did all of that with no investment money, correct? That you did this organically.
And that is correct. We did not have any interest in I candidly didn't want a puppet master. When you bring somebody on, you now, we'd have to create a board, and you'd have, investors that could then kind of dictate the pace and the priorities and those sorts of things. And we wanted to be able to make those decisions ourselves. And so
again, we've talked about this to our audience. Yes, there is a huge need for speed and land grab. At the same time, at what cost? So with that said, tell us what you learned at Amazon, KPMG, and tell us a story about Better RX real fast.
Okay. So I spent about a little over 9 years at KPMG. I was right out of school on the advisory side. And then I thought I'd be there for about 2 years and ended up nine, maybe 9.5. Then went over to headquarters at Amazon, spent 5 years there, and then made the transition over to join my business partner. He had started Closed Door Pharmacy back in 2007. He had grown to 3 locations in 3 states, and he was a big Amazon fan, and he brought me over to help figure out how to scale the model. And so we realized we really needed to change to a technology company so completely change the service offering, one that could really help both patients and providers, and one that could scale across the country. So we went from a closed door pharmacy. That first he started from '07 to I guess 13. I joined him in 13, and then from 13 to 25, we had this 12-year run of growing this tech company. And I'll tell you, the first 6 years it was like wandering through the wilderness, making all kinds of mistakes. A lot of kind of on the cliff moments where, you're looking down at the abyss and you're hoping that you don't end up down there. But, through, having some really smart people on board, a lot of grit, a lot of determination with my business partner and myself and lots of other people, we've got to enjoy really the last 6 years of phenomenal growth. It was between 40 and 45% year over year top line revenue. Because we didn't have outside funds, we're very focused on being very scrappy, frugal. It's one of the most important lessons I learned from Amazon. A very frugal organization, at least back when I was with them. And so we would do everything we could across the organization to save as much as we could so that we could reinvest back into the organization and grow as quickly as possible. So that's how we were able to avoid taking on outside funds, being really scrappy.
But it's really hard to get 45% growth with no external funding. So you had to make sure that the profits were extremely high to be able to have the working capital to put back in the business and then pay everybody else and then some. So everybody had to have fairly meager budgets, and yet you did so well on acquisition.
That taught us in the early days. I mean, we went for a while where things were very lean. With my business partner and myself, we brought on the best talent we could, but we could only afford so much talent. It was always, the constraints were always and I know this is true for virtually every business, but how much we could afford to actually, we had so many needs across the business on things that needed to be done. We just couldn't afford to pay people.
So I'm gonna interrupt you, because this is one, like you said, everybody faces this. Everybody has more needs than capabilities. So what did you learn about how to allocate so that you got the best peak yield? Because there's so many things you got to put it into. How do you make that decision to say, okay, I've got only $5, but we need $50 worth of people, talent, resources? What do you do?
That was a constant problem in the early days. That was our big problem, among others. But so there were a couple things. First of all, I ended up taking on positions I had never taken on before: head of sales, head of client experience. I started as the COO and then moved into kind of president and then COO role over a period of time. But I originally just started taking on these roles because we couldn't afford the talent. The talent that we did have was not the talent we needed, and so I had to learn. I got really smart on all sorts of different sales leadership methodologies, CX methodologies, learned NPS score, all kinds of things. And then once we started having the funds to be able to afford talent, so I could start moving into other things myself. I'll tell you the key to what we did that we found to be very successful. One thing kind of above all, and that was, I believed deeply that the key to our success, the way we would grow, and I believe this to this day, it just turned out to be so true, time and time again: attract and retain the very best talent for the long haul. So how do you do that? If you can attract and retain the best talent, so you're not churning through people and you're getting top tier talent. If you have the best talent and you're pointed in the same direction, everybody working together toward common goals, it's so hard to beat that. And so the way that we did it when we didn't have funds is we created a type of culture where people would describe it as not having the Sunday evening blues. So at our organization, you don't do the Sunday evening blues. We would have high expectations, both in terms of results, but also being the very best version of yourself. And our values were the key to that. So non-negotiable rules of behavior. And so if you think about it, A talent loves to hang out with A talent, right? So we would only do A talent. And if everybody is feeding the good dog and not the bad dog, because everybody always has those two hanging out within them, right? But if the expectation is you have to feed the good dog, there's no bad dog tolerated. We just wouldn't tolerate it. And so if everybody's bringing the best version of themselves, you create this type of place that people just love to call home. And high performance, but where everybody's just working really hard together. So people would join. And one of the favorite parts of my role as CEO was I would meet with every new team member within the first 2 days of hire. Loved that about it. And I would thank them deeply for joining the organization. And I'd give them counsel on how to be wildly successful with the organization. But I would always ask them, so how's it going? And consistently I would get responses of, this was every time, I can't believe how cool and how nice and how supportive everybody that I talk to is.
So this is really interesting. I'm going to delve in.
Sure.
A quick side note. When you joined, how many employees? When exit, how many employees?
Oh, great question. So when I joined, because it was a closed door pharmacy model, it was talent heavy. So we're resource heavy. So there were, in the first couple of years while I was there, when we still had the pharmacies, we were up to maybe 110 in 3 different states. But then when we moved away from those models, from that model, we went down to between maybe 10 and 12. Like we were hovering around a dozen people.
And then you grew it to what big size?
About 75.
Nice, small.
Which, by the way, I love having people on the team, but fewer is actually better. If you can, if your model is more scalable, fewer people to do a lot more that's what I love about SaaS.
Yeah. You noticed. I noticed immediately. I said, "Oh, good, nice, small, close-knit team, high performing." Got it. So just one example from my own curiosity. How do you tell people, don't feed the bad dogs? What are the actual words? How do you encourage people to keep on the positive on the good dogs? Give me a very specific example, because I want to learn how to do that.
Well, I'll just tell you. I'll share two things. First of all, the very last thing I told the team at the last all hands. So I'm up there in front of the teams. Last time I get to do this, we'd have these all hands every 6 months, bring everybody together. We were a fully distributed team, so we would pick a fun location, bring everybody together every 6 months, and we just have a blast with them. And the last thing I told the team, these were kind of part of my parting comments, were, look, don't try to be anybody else. You have your own unique talents, abilities, attributes, things that make you uniquely you. So don't try to be anybody else. Just be the very best version of yourself. And we all know what that means because you always have these conflicting voices in your head. And by the way, our values were specifically designed to help bring out the good dog and kind of get rid of the bad dog. So that was the other thing that we did. We had 4 core values with descriptions that in the early days, we had the talent. We needed to kind of upgrade on our talent. We didn't have a set of core values, and there were a lot of maybe behaviors that weren't great that were going on. And so we created the core values because I would say, okay, well, this is a behavior we can't have. So I'd stick it in the values. This is a behavior that we love. We'd stick it in the values. And then and I got to the point where there weren't any behaviors that were going on that were outside of those values. 4 core values, but with descriptions. And so we could just point to those values and say, look, these are the rules of behavior. Me, first and foremost, non-negotiable rules of behavior, leadership team, and then across the whole organization. And then I tell the team, look, you're not going to live these perfectly. We're not perfect. I'm not perfect. But so when you make mistakes, the key to your success here, probably the most important thing is when you mess up, what do you choose to do?
Yes.
Are you going to get defensive? Are you going to point blame? Are you going to hide? Are you going to just keep repeating the behaviors? Or are you just going to fix it and move on? Then, because I said, look, some of the best conversations, I tell this in front of the whole team regularly. Some of the best conversations I've had were with members of the leadership team when they would come to me and say, hey, Ben, I noticed something you either did or didn't do that might conflict with one of our core values.
Wow.
And I would say, well, heck yeah, let's have that conversation.
Wow.
We would just talk about it and maybe there was no defensiveness in our culture, no egos, politics, silos, turf, any of those sorts of things. We all row in the same direction.
I have to tell you that is absolutely abnormal. Congratulations. It's hard. It's hard to create that environment. You know that from the bigger companies.
It's so much fun. It is so much fun. And people would come to they'd say, I had somebody, actually several people I'd have this conversation with, but one of them joined in the last year, and he joined the leadership team. I've actually known him for several years, and he pulled me aside and he said, he'd been there for several weeks, and he said, "Is this like real? Like, I don't actually believe like people. This isn't right. Like, what's?" I said, "This is real. This is people just being the good version of themselves, and just do that, and you're going to do great."
And these are people,
no games, no politics, no weird stuff.
These are people all over the U.S. or all over the world who are on the team. Is the U.S. heavy?
Oh, great question. So primarily U.S. We had for a time we had some folks in Bulgaria, some developers in Bulgaria, and then we still have one in Mexico. We had a team in Mexico, but I think we have 30 team members, 30 states, team members in 30 states now.
Cool. I'm going to lead you all over the different places. So a distributed team, high performance, keeping everything to the 4 core values. Who gets to be the QA? Who gets to be the the values evangelist? How do you get adherence when there are so many different layers of management at 75 and growing fast and adding people fast? Yeah. It's hard to keep everyone towing the line.
So I only own 3 things in the organization. And I would tell the whole team, look, guys, this is not a hero-led organization. This is a team-led organization. I'd say, look, I only own 3 things as the CEO. I own where we're going, mission, strategy. I own the culture, which is based on our core values, and I own the leadership team. But the leadership team actually runs the company. So pretty much everything was owned by each of the individual leadership team members. So that allowed me to focus on where we're going and make sure that we have the right leadership team members and that we have the right culture. And that's one of the core reasons I would meet with every new team member, say, look, you will not be within 2 days of hire. I mean, I thank them deeply. I really care. These are folks I care deeply about. When someone would join us, they take a big bet on us. That's not an easy thing. That's a hard thing. That's a scary thing to wonder, was this really as advertised? And I'd say, look, our job is to make sure that if you have any surprises, that they're good surprises, not bad surprises, that you're just as happy as you could possibly be being here. And the way that we would primarily do it, transparency, candor, kindness, those sorts of things. But people didn't get surprised. And so, the key was, at least in part, meeting with them and hearing from me directly, live these values. They're non-negotiable. You don't have to do it perfectly, but when you mess up, fix it, and then be a good enough team member. We call it, live the values 200%, 100% responsible for your own behavior, and the other 100% responsible for helping your teammates. If you see something, just ask about it. Don't point fingers. Don't get on their back and, or get in their face. Just ask them. Say, hey, just help me understand.
I would have wanted to have been an employee there. Beautiful. Well done. Well done.
One of the benefits, this was just a fascinating thing that I learned. When you create the type of culture where it just draws people in, not only can you attract and retain great talent, which is the key. That's the key to success. But all across the industry, we would have people all the time say, hey, can I come work for you guys? How do I get into your organization? Because when you guys show up at conferences, you have the very best team. They love each other. They're working together, just hand in hand.
Yeah.
They're not competing with each other. They know where we're going as an organization, and they're doing everything they can to work together to get to that place. And everybody, it just from all over the place, all over the country, all over different types of companies in the industry, we regularly get requests. How do I get in your company?
So tactical question, I've got another major question, but managing remotely.
Yeah.
So did every one of your senior leaders have virtual staff meetings once a week with their subordinates? What was the frequency and cadence of people meeting, connecting? Because that's one of the things, right? You've got this now back to office / hybrid, but you were completely 100%. So
100%.
how do you create camaraderie when people are already used to a certain cadence at home, that they get to work in a certain style? What made that accountability as well as connection work? Because you still have to deliver. Last question on the remote element.
Yeah, so I'll jump into that. If I miss anything, just let me know. Okay. I'm happy to spend a lot of time on this one. So accountability was our second core value. First, integrity. Above all, you don't play in the gray zone. That's number one. And these are in order of priority. So if there is ever a potential conflict between a core value, you look at the one that comes first. So the first is integrity. No playing in the gray zone. We always do the right thing. We're transparent. The second is accountability. Like you gotta bring results. The third is people obsessed, and we just love on the people that we have. We're so grateful that they have joined the team, and we do the same with our clients and our partners. We treat everybody the way we want to be treated. And then the last is scrappy. Because accountability was right after integrity, you got to bring your A game. We tell people again, we only do A talent. So any talent gets results. We don't make excuses. We don't point blame. We don't those sorts of things. We go figure out how to get it done. And it being that second core value, I think was very helpful in helping to ensure we would get the results that we need. Now, as a remote team, sorry, did you have a? Yeah, as a remote team, fully distributed across 30 or so states. The way we would stay connected, we would meet every day. This was one of the keys and we would talk about, we'd meet for 10 to 15 minutes as a team. As a leadership team, we'd meet, and then they would meet with their individual teams. And we would briefly talk about, okay, what was yesterday like? How'd it go? Just the highlights. And then what do you have planned for today? And the reason, and these are just high points, and then any issues or blockers that you might have. And the reason we would do that high level of communication, boy, we learned if you're not communicating regularly, if you don't know what's going on, things just slow way down, because then you have, this person over here cranking on this, but this person over here who's maybe working on something that's similar, or maybe this person's blocked and they need help from this person, but somehow they haven't been able to connect. No, every day we get rid of those blockers and we make sure that everybody knows just the highlights of what's going on.
Wow, you answered my question. Daily.
Every day.
Every day. That is good. And you 6 months, you get together and enjoy each other's companies after having worked remotely, hugs and everything.
Oh, these are the best. Yeah, these are so much fun. I mean, we work hard, play hard, but make sure that we look at the results of the last 6 months. How do we do? Set the plan for the next 6 months, the next year, and then we'd celebrate the wins and learn from the things that we didn't do as well. So, but then we just going back to the cadence, we'd also meet every week as a team, and then we would meet every 6 weeks as a broader team. So kind of the remote versions of how are we doing, for the quarterly sprints that we.
When it comes to major question, and it may take the remainder of the time, when it comes to selling the business, how did it come about? Were you just heads down doing your thing and somebody says, hey, I want to buy your business? Or was this a deliberate strategy that you had in mind with your partner? And what did you learn, and what would you advise our first-time founders listening to this as to how to sculpt a business that it can be purchased? 2 questions.
Yeah, I think I can answer them maybe with the same answer.
Okay.
Heads down, focused on building the very best business based on the fundamentals, the right things, high growth, high retention, great product development, things and efficient internal operations that to kind of grease the skid, so to speak. And if you focus on the fundamentals, the things that we would always build for the long term. I learned this from Bezos. Two great things from Bezos. One, always start with the customer and work backwards. I love that principle. But then also, someone would ask Bezos, or they, compliment him and say, "Hey, boy, you had such a great quarter," and he would be thinking, the results from this quarter, it was 3 years ago that we, put a plan in place to make sure that now, and then started executing on that plan so that now we're having a great quarter. It didn't just magically happen.
Well done.
And so, that's the way that we would think about things. We'd always build for the long term, not the short term. And so we knew it. We thought at some point, we didn't have some grand plan to go sell the company. We had no idea, if and when. We thought probably at some point we would sell, but didn't have any plans to do that. But the thought was, if you build a great business, no shortcuts, no skeletons in the closet, a great business, then if and when we decide maybe it's time to go look at the value of the company, we're probably going to be, reasonably surprised at the results. And so it wasn't until I think it was February of this year. And by the way, we had gotten outreach from potential investors and acquirers for years, and it was to the point where you're getting several a day, every day, both my business partner and myself, and you just kind of move these in. We started moving them into an offline folder, so we had hundreds and hundreds of these emails that we just, and every once in a while I'd have a conversation with somebody just to kind of pay attention roughly to. I knew at some point I'd probably have to learn what the sale, going through a sale might look like. And so I needed to keep a little bit of a pulse on that. But it was almost entirely heads down, grow the business as quickly as possible. And so I think it was about February where I went to my business partner and said, "Hey, I wonder if it makes sense for us to just kind of poke our heads up a little bit and see, what this might be worth." And really, that was part of my job, to make sure, him as the majority owner, part of my job was really to make sure he knew what his options were. So he said, "Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Why don't we go ahead and spend a little bit of time on that?" I talked to a handful of attorneys. That's part of the team, and then reached out to some investment bankers, just folks that had reached out. And then I got a recommendation to talk to a firm in Salt Lake, and sat down, met with them, was very impressed by them for a whole variety of reasons. But at the end of our conversation, they said, "Well, we'd love to value your business." And, everybody that I had spoken with, prior to that, they were all very impressed with, the story and what we had done and the why and all of those sorts of things. But these guys were the first who said, "We'd love to actually value your company." And I said, "Great, let's do that." And so we got him a bunch of information and sat down with him, I don't know, a couple of weeks later. And they said, "We would not sell your business for," they went through kind of how they went through all these different methodologies for valuing it. And they said, "We would not sell your business any less than this number." And I about fell out of my chair. I was shocked, just candidly, because again, we weren't paying attention. And, I told my business partner, and we said, "Yeah, let's start down this path." And it was a very fast process,
It had to be if you just started in February to talking about it now, right?
Yeah, I mean, we I think signed in first half of July, and I don't think I had a meeting with the investment bankers until March, when we were actually sat down for the first time with him. So, yeah, thank you.
You deserve it. You deserve it. What a beautiful way to actually even end this podcast, to say this is how we grew it, heads down. That is the best way to have an exit. Just don't worry about it.
You just don't worry about it.
Do the right thing. All of this optical positioning and making sure, cut it out.
No.
Congratulations also. Yeah, congratulations also on treating people as humans. This is something that is rare, Ben, and that's why I just remembered 6-7 years ago is when we started dialoguing.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense now that you've gone and executed that. And I couldn't be more proud. So happy that the exit couldn't have come to better people, Congratulations on the way you conducted yourself and your partner. Well done. Thanks.
So appreciate that. That was actually the best part of the journey, was the
Mm.
people
It
and
is.
just running together. We just had so much fun with the best group of people that you could ever hope to work with. So
Congratulations, Ben. Thank you. Thank you again for being on our show. They'll love this. Nice and tight. Love the journey. Thanks again. And everybody else, thank you. Ben Clark from Better RX, and a great friend, and what a story. Until next time. See you then. Bye.